No,
Okay.
no, I'm not there. I'm still green run level.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Open Space for May 20th, 2019. I'm Fraser Cain. That's an introduction. So, anyone who's listening to this doesn't have to hear the just uncomfortable silence of me wrestling with computer equipment. But, as always, until I know this is happening, I need some kind of confirmation of my existence. So it looks like I see some confirmation of our existence. So, hey everyone, back to having a guest. This week I've got Dennis Taylor, author of the Bobiverse series. We are Bob, we are Legion. Did I get that right? We are
We
Legion,
are
we are
Legion, we are
Bob.
Bob.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I said I'm a huge fan, and I've already clearly messed it up. Now, I want to apologize in advance. We're getting a bit of a buzz, which I think is coming from a feedback from Dennis's computer. We can't fix it. He is strapped for technology where he is. So we'll have to just go with this. But he's gonna do most of the talking, and I won't echo back into it. So there we go.
Yeah, conditions are primitive here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, some kind of mountain retreat. So why don't you give everyone an introduction? Who you are, what you do?
Hi, I am Dennis Taylor. My pen name is Dennis E. Taylor because there are a lot of Dennis Taylors out there. Um, I'm the author of the Bobiverse series, as mentioned. We are Legion, we are Bob. I didn't want to screw it up.
Yeah.
Uh, for We Are Many and All These Worlds. Uh, Also, more recently, Singularity Trap and Outland, which has just come out and is doing quite well. I'm a retired computer programmer and now full time author.
So, but the actual order of when you wrote these is a little different, right? You actually revised Outland more recently.
Yep. Yeah. Outland was my very first attempt at novel writing. And when I was writing it, I wasn't entirely sure if I was even going to try publishing it or anything. So it's kind of a trial balloon, I guess, and a learning experience. And then once uh, Legion took off, Audible offered me a contract on it. So I thought maybe I'd better edit the thing a little bit. So it was taken off Amazon, edited drastically, and is now going back up.
And how much did you dramatically edit it?
Well, the basic story is the same. I've changed one or two things. I've added one small little subplot. The crooks are different; they're a little more believable. Mostly, it's about writing style. As I said, it was my very first attempt at writing. I had no clue. I was learning as I went, and 4 books later, I have a bit better idea, of how to do characterizations and so forth.
So I was introduced to the Bobiverse series by my Astronomy Cast co-host Dr. Pamela Gay, who was a huge fan even before me, and she was like, knowing how much I love about space and astronomy and von Neumann probes and artificial intelligence and mega engineering at an enormous scale. She said, this is like the perfect book for you. Plus, written in a kind of hilarious style. Um, like, where did that come from? I mean, I have given and suggested that book to everyone who I can get my hands on, and they have all loved it. Everyone has read it. My wife has read the series. I've loved the series. I've recommended it to my father, my son. Everybody loves this book. Like, what went into that? Where'd it come from?
Well, I've been reading science fiction for 50 plus years. Um Very little else except science fiction. The occasional Dan Brown or something like that. But it's almost an exclusive diet. Um, and 50 years of reading a particular genre, you pick up the style, you pick up the expectations, you pick up a lot of ideas. In some cases, you pick up ideas that you wish the author had done differently or had gone in a different direction with. And you say, if I was writing this book, I would do this and that and the other thing. And when I started writing We Are Legion, a little bit of that crept in.
Um, I mean, some of the ideas. I mean, this idea in the series of essentially von Neumann probes, right? This idea of artificial intelligence, which is using the resources of a solar system to expand itself exponentially and proceed to colonize, as it were, explore, but you know, the entire Milky Way galaxy, right? I mean, in a pure exponential computer science standpoint, it is like this. I don't know, like you can sort of imagine it's like a machine, right? That is just like working to turn the entire Milky Way into raw resources, and yet you humanized it, which I thought was great. So tell me, like, I'd love to hear sort of your thoughts about how those processes came together.
Okay, the first thing I have to mention is that I like to think of myself as a plotter, as a writer, but I'm lying to myself. I'm very much a pantser. There's a little bit of pre-plotting in there, but mostly it's discovery writing. Um, I'd also love to be able to claim that I had the entire Bobiverse trilogy mapped out when I
Obviously, you did.
started.
Yeah, you could
Not
tell
even
that there was
close.
foreshadowing right in the beginning. You could see it all the way through to the end.
Yeah, but I had a vague idea of where I wanted to go, but it was very much an iterative development process. Also, I should mention that I had about 2.5 books written before the first one was published, so there was a lot of opportunity for the development process. Um, We Are Legion started out, excuse me, as um, as a book based on World Out of Time by Larry Niven and The Ship Who Sang by Anne McCaffrey, both of which are books that I just loved when I read them. And I've always thought the idea of being able to just have your own spaceship and take off and do whatever you wanted was a great thing. Um, the next step is, rather than being biological, become a cybernetic entity. Then you don't have to worry about radiation, you don't have to worry about aging, you don't have to worry about any of the problems that you might have from being biological, and you can replicate yourself. Now we got von Neumann probes, right? It was, like I say, it was a very iterative process. For instance, my first version didn't have the VR. And I got about halfway through writing We Are Legion, and I realized that what I had was a book full of talking heads without the heads. It was not visual. So I had to do something about that. So I went back and added VR so that the Bobs could, sit in libraries and talk to each other and throw things at each other and stuff. Um, my editor, I can't remember if it was my editor or my agent actually, but one of them suggested that the Bobs should have different personalities.
Yeah, I was going to wonder about that.
Yeah, so I went back and I started tweaking, each particular clone and giving them something different. It went like that. I got through um, partway into book three, and I thought, well, it'd be great if I had this. So that I went back to book one, added it, and pushed that through the plot. By the time I was finished, I had all these threads that pretty much came together at the end. But like I say, it was not pre-planned.
Did you find, like, when I think about exponential exploration, exponential development, I mean, it is really hard to then put any kind of constraints on this. Did you
Well,
find that was sort of challenging for you to not just have them within years dominate?
that's one of the reasons why the Bobs turned out to be very reluctant cloners. Um, they don't like cloning, and that slows them down. Uh, Printers slow them down. Resource scarcity slows them down. Too many demands on their time slows them down. It, Absolutely, you have to place some kind of limit on exponential development. Otherwise, you have a universe full of paper clips. But in practical terms, there always is some kind of a bottleneck, and eventually you hit it, and then you find out what your limiting factor is. In the case of the Bobs, like I say, it's printer turnaround times and resource scarcity.
And I don't want to go into too much detail for people, but there was definitely a overarching deadline that required that they had a set amount of resources to try and move around to come up with solutions to deal with the problem. Once the
Yeah.
deadline was met, then I can't even imagine what they would get up to in the far future.
Well, in books 4 and 5, actually, you'll find out.
Books
But
4 and 5, did you just
yeah,
what? No.
yeah, currently in the works.
Awesome. I had
Yeah,
no
it's
idea.
yeah. The next book is actually a duology. It's because it's too long for a single book. Um, Working title is The Search for Bender, and the Bobiverse has continued to grow. But spoiler alert: the Bobs are still reluctant cloners, so there aren't as many of them as you might expect.
Um, so then, talking a bit about like how much of like leading edge science, astronomy, physics, things like that made its way into the books.
As much as I could manage. The, for instance, the distances and transit times are all accurate. I actually pulled down some files from astronomy websites and created myself a 3D map so that I would know the actual distance between any two actual stars. I've tried to be as accurate as possible with the stellar classifications of the suns. Um, I calculated the time that it would take at 1G or 2G acceleration or whatever to get there, allowing for time dilation and everything like that. I actually did a spreadsheet and then later on I wrote an app to make sure that I kept track of everything.
Yeah, I mean, you even had to deal with the amount of like the communication lag with people in high velocities and what the lag would be for people attempting to interact with them, which I thought was great.
Yeah. Plus, until they came up with the SCUT technology, of course, they were communicating using radio, and that has a lag time going between stars as well.
Yeah, for years. So going through this process, then, I mean, most people, if they can make it their way through one book, they don't ever want to write another book. So, what did you learn about yourself writing this book?
I like writing.
Yeah, you're like one of
It
those rare people that likes to write and can get it done.
Well, the interesting thing, and this was a surprise to me, but the process of writing feels very much like the process of programming. If you like programming, you'll like writing. It's the same kind of creative process. It tweaks the same part of the brain
Yeah,
and programming. So there it is.
yeah. Um, now I've done a couple of books, and I don't want to do them anymore. I'm in the definitely liked having written camp.
Oh, like exercise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Um, so then, like, I'd love to sort of hear your thoughts, sort of on the current state of science fiction. Do you think that where do we stand to the golden age? Do you think from your reading of science fiction?
Well, actually, I commented on this on a video that Isaac Arthur asked me to put in a brief vocal intro for. But the wonderful thing about the Golden Age was that there were really no constraints. I don't know if you've ever read Edmund Hamilton's Captain Future series.
No.
Okay, every planet in the solar system was habitable,
Right.
right? There were native Jovians who were humanoid. There were native Venusians who were humanoid. There were even Plutonians. I don't know. Who were humanoid, and go figure at a couple of degrees above absolute zero, but that's the way it was. You had 9 planets, you had 9 native humanoid species. There were no constraints on what you could do in those days. And now people know more science. In general, we know more science. It's a lot more difficult to pull off a real, I guess, what we call science fantasy story. So science fiction now tends to be more hard science fiction. And not necessarily anything wrong with that, but I think it does constrain the genre a little. You still get people going off in crazy directions, and there's some wonderful science fiction out there, but it's harder. It's harder to do that.
But I
More
mean, it feels
bold
to me in
moves.
reading your work like you wanted to tell a good story. You wanted to tell it in an entertaining way, but it definitely feels like you made sure to do the work to not, I don't know, like gloss over the parts that required being scientifically accurate. I mean, obviously, we don't and may never have any kind of faster than light communications method, but you went that way to have a to be able to tell a story, and that's and I personally don't really care, you know, like I will definitely mentally fact check the science in various things, but I don't get too worked up about it.
Yeah. Um, Adding science fiction technology is something you have to do carefully. You have to add it in such a way that it's internally consistent and doesn't break any of the rules that we already know. For instance, if somebody wants to write a spaceship, that's great. But if they assume a Newtonian universe, then any good science fiction reader is just going to throw the book against a wall. You have to, you know, you have to shine a light on the fact that you're going around Einstein, right? Um, just things like that. If you ignore the science too much, you end up with science fantasy, and you may or may not pull that off.
And do you think that, I mean, do you think that's worth the risk? I mean, I'm into about a third of the way into Outland now, and sort of I'm starting to get a pretty good sense now of what the science fantasy is. Um, what's your take on how to go about that?
Well, I write the kind of books that I write. Somebody else, might write more of a Star Warsy thing, where they're a little more fast and loose. Um, and that's their choice. And if it works, if you can tell a good story, and if you can sell that story, good for you, good on you. It's not about whether or not you should or shouldn't, or whether you can or can't. It's whether or not you can pull it off.
I got a couple of questions coming from people watching right now. One, it comes from Larry Beckham. Have any film people bought an option to We're Legion, We're Bob?
I It has been optioned.
Mm-hmm.
I think the option is up in September, and there haven't been any bites, so they may or may not renew it. It's renewable for another 18 months, but you don't know until the last minute.
It's interesting, though. I mean, you see Game of Thrones coming to an end. Um, you see what's happening with other sci-fi series being adapted and picked up. Um, it seems like a book that would be relatively a series that would be relatively straightforward to do. I'm trying to. I mean, there'd be a lot of computer science, but you could have the same actor play a lot of the roles. That would be a time saver, right?
Yeah, but you better get him in an ironclad contract.
Yeah, I guess so. Um, what have you picked any actors in your mind? There must be somebody.
Uh, they had a discussion about that on Fans of the Bobiverse, actually, about who they would have playing Bob, and some of the other characters and stuff like that. And I followed it along, and wasn't thinking too much about it one way or the other. And then somebody suggested Ryan Reynolds for Bob, and that's like a mind worm. I cannot get him out of my brain
Yeah,
now. I think because of oh, my mind just went blank. Um, what is the movie that he just did?
Detective Pikachu.
No, no, not Pikachu. Oh my God, no, no.
You mean
Um,
Deadpool?
Deadpool, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's great. That's mine goes completely whoosh,
Yep.
flat. But yeah, and I don't know why, and I don't know if he'd actually be good at it, but it's stuck in my mind now.
But I think there's real value to optioning a script or optioning a series of books like yours, like the Expanse series, where someone has already done the heavy lifting and thought through the plot and thought through the ramifications and talked to fans and heard the feedback and learned where maybe some parts didn't work as well as other parts. you would think that that would be a no-brainer for some production company, especially. I mean, it's sort of the same thing that happened with The Martian, with Andy Weir in The Martian, that it's ready to go. Feels
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, The Martian's the gold standard for science fiction movies, that's for sure. I think the problem isn't so much that uh, Legion or any other particular story is so good as a potential series, as that there are so many other possibilities as well. It's a crowded market. There are a lot of people with a lot of scripts looking for a limited number of production companies and directors to produce their story.
I think also there are sort of these tentpole gigantic blockbuster projects that gobble up budget and cast a wide shadow, like the whole rise of comic book movies. As
Mhm.
the latest Avengers movie is about to surpass or has already surpassed what Avatar, so it's now the most highest grossing movie of all time. Like that is what the movie studios are looking to bet on. But I think with the television shows, the Netflixes, things like that, there's real value to building. I mean, just adapting something that worked. And I think that books go into TV series. They don't make good movies.
Mhm. Oh yeah, just about everybody who's commented on the Legion series thinks that it would be better as a Netflix miniseries or something like that rather than a movie, because trying to fit all the story arcs and subplots into a movie, you'd lose something.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you would love you'd love to see it on the screen.
Yeah, yeah. What any old way,
Yeah.
Netflix series, TV series, movie, I don't care, whatever works. But excuse me, sorry. Part of the problem with Legion might be that it's a little cerebral. There's a lot of philosophy in there. It's it's thought provoking, and that's great for a book, but it might be hard to translate that into a series, or sorry, into a visual medium is what I should have said. I think Singularity Trap would make a better movie than Legion, and I think Outland would make a better TV series.
Right.
They're
Uh,
more fluid.
so what were some, I guess, some topics, some stuff that you wanted to get into the series that maybe weren't able to make it in?
In Legion.
Yeah, or did everything make it in?
No, I think everything made it in that I wanted to say. Because it's an open-ended series, there was no real pressure to shoehorn in every possible subplot that I could think of because there's always more books.
So then let's talk a bit about Outland and this series. So which are the books that are coming out for this one? You've got the first one already. There's going to be more?
Yeah, the contract with Audible was for a two-book deal, Outland and Earthside. Earthside's about a third written and has been about a third written for about 4 years now. Uh, that's that's just the way life went. Um, I started writing the second book, and then I decided to switch over and write Legion instead. And then once Legion took off, of course, it's been a roller coaster ride, and Earthside's just been set aside. But now I've got to do it. I've got a contract.
Right. Well, what's your like writing process?
I'm a binge writer. I will sit down when the mood strikes me, and I'll hammer away for hours. Especially if I have uninterrupted time out on the patio. That's my favorite place to write when it's warm. Um, and well, I wrote Singularity Trap, I think, over the course of about 3 weeks, just about the entire book.
Wow.
And then I spent months going back and tweaking. So I binge, and then I spend a lot of time working on the details.
So you don't have any like routine. You don't uh set yourself some hours and sit down and write.
It would be wonderful if I was that disciplined, but no.
Yeah. That's
I am technically semi retired. So
yeah.
I
Good
I
luck with
don't
that.
really, yeah. I don't really want to think of this as a day job, so I don't do a 40-hour week or anything like that. I set myself a certain amount of progress that I want to make every week, but when it happens or where it happens,
Yeah, I it's interesting to me. I mean, I think anybody who is a professional creative person, this is something that they wrestle with. Brad McGashett is asking, have you ever experienced writer's block? And if so, would you get back on the how would you get back on the creative train? Do you have an opinion on writer's block? I have
I
one, but we'll get yours.
I don't think I've ever experienced true writer's block. From reading up on what some people go through when they're having what they consider to be writer's block, I'm thinking, wow, I would just hate to go through that. I've had periods when,
Yeah. Sorry, please continue. My wife just got home. Didn't realize I was doing a show.
oh, okay, well, I'm expecting the dog to jump up on me anytime now, so we're probably in the same boat.
Yeah.
Uh, I've had periods where the work is slowed, where I'll go several weeks without doing anything or something like that, or where I feel like I'm stuck on a point. But it's not writer's block. It's not, I don't want to characterize it as being the same level as what some people go through.
Yeah, it's I mean, for me it's I'm like at a certain point you have to get over that whole concept of letting your work happen when you're feeling productive. You have to do the work even when you're not feeling productive, when you're not feeling creative, right? For me, I mean, I laugh that I don't want to write another book, but I write all the time. I write videos and I write tons of stuff for Universe Today, and I just have to sit down and turn on my Pomodoro timer and just start grinding away on the various tasks that are in front of me. And then I what I find for me is I'll get 10 minutes into it and I'm like, I'm having a great time. This is so much fun, even though I was having so much trouble just getting started.
Oh
And
yeah, I definitely have that problem. Getting started is 90% of the
yeah,
battle. Once you get a flow going, quite often it's, oh, I just noticed the refractor in the background.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
Anyway, yeah, once you get started uh, and the flow gets going, it's almost hard to stop. But one of the nice things that I have, and I think it sounds like you also have, is you have a bunch of different things you can be working on. And if you just can't make any progress on one thing, well, there's this other thing that needs doing.
yeah. I mean, I think that if you look at how much time, say you want to write a book is 100,000 words. You can write when you're in sort of pure free flow. You could probably write about 500 words an hour, pre-edited, or even a little faster. So you could write a book in about say 200 hours of writing, which is say an hour a day for a little over half a year. So it's like it doesn't actually take that much time. It's the getting started on that hour each and every day, or binging it and sitting out on your deck and getting the whole thing done in 3 weeks or something, which sounds
Yeah,
great.
and but that depends on how well you have the story mapped out in your head when you start. I taught myself to touch type, so I can touch type 50, 60 words a minute when I get going. And if I know what I want to say, I literally am sitting there hammering away almost like I'm taking dictation.
Yep.
I free associate when I write. I do not backspace. I don't go back and correct bad grammar or anything like that. I just type. And first draft is crap kind of thing. And that's great. It gets the plot down, it gets the major points down. And then the editing comes in, and that takes a lot longer than the binge writing.
And I mean, the way that you are coming up with these ideas later on and then refactoring them back into the story, I mean, that just again from a computer standpoint, that's tough. And from a writing standpoint, I can't even imagine the implications because you've literally got to read your whole book again and go, how did this change? How did that change? How did this change based on this new decision that I decided to make thanks to my editor?
Yeah, I think that probably my career in programming helped with that. because it's similar problems that you run into when writing a large, complex series of programs. You have to find ways to remember what's happening over here and how it relates to what you're doing over there. It's just part of the same process.
Nancy's Atkinson, oh sorry, Nancy Graziano asks, as someone with a technical background, how difficult was it to tap into your creative side to develop the plot, characters, twists, settings, etc.? As a tech writer with an engineering degree, I've wanted to write creatively, but have had a problem getting creative.
I don't want to overgeneralize because I don't know, um, what her skills, talents, and so forth are. In my case, what I found was that I had the skills and talents that I needed. I just hadn't ever tried to use them. I guess it's the only way I can put it, because I mean I started writing in my late 50s, and it took off right away. So obviously I had been not doing something for 50 years that I could have been doing.
Yeah. Um, does that, do you think, though, having used your method, I mean, it feels to me like you do uh, admire the skills of the plotters.
Mhm.
Have you taken a crack at sort of mixing up your methodology for working on a book?
I'm trying to become more of a plotter with every book. Um, every time I do it, I learn a little. And every time I start on a new book, I try to go a little more into getting the map down before I start. It's slow. I don't know that I'll ever be a real thoroughgoing plotter. I know some people who have each chapter named, and the action that happens in that chapter thoroughly described before they even start writing. I don't think I'll ever get to that point.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that the kinds of books that I've done have never required, like, I don't do fiction, I've done nonfiction, and it's never been required to plot something out. But I would say that not doing that right would make me not want to take it on, because I admire a well-crafted plot so much, and it's that idea of sort of the just the gap. You have good tastes, and so you know what well-formed plot looks like.
Mhm.
And so when you are unable to do it yourself, then you just, you have to struggle with not being willing to get any better.
Well, we all have ways in which we fall short of what we'd like to be able to do. I mean, Agatha Christie mysteries, or that type of genre, where you have this really weird murder, and the detective has to figure it out, and there are all these blind alleys and false starts and stuff like that, and then the actual murder turns out to be something really weird involving a pig's bladder
Right.
and like that. I don't think I could ever write that kind of book. I could
Right.
not come up with the intricate kind of plots and twists and various ways of killing people without being obvious about it that are necessary to write that kind of book. But I haven't spent a lifetime reading that kind of book.
Hmm.
I think there's a certain amount of internalization that goes on when you read a particular genre. So I write science fiction, and I have no trouble writing science fiction because I've been reading science fiction.
Have you read the Three Body Problem trilogy yet?
I read the first book.
Okay, yeah. So the first book is a bit of a slog, some cool ideas, but sort of hard. You've sort of almost a very tough story to get through, and a lot of political sort of Chinese things that I think make sense from a person who lived through some of these revolutions and stuff.
Mhm.
Book two and book three are mind bending. They are just a whole other world, and I think they definitely profit from clearly there's some thought going into it just in sort of over the long term, right, to plot this out. and especially the third one. Third one is just bonkers crazy, and yet does hold together. So I highly recommend. I was going to get into a conversation with you about those books if you had read them, but if you haven't, then all I can do is highly recommend that you read the next two. The first one is fine. The second one is incredible, and the third one will just blow your mind.
Yeah. This is sad to say, but since I've become an author, I have been reading a lot less science fiction than I used to, and also watching a lot less TV. But that's a good thing. Um, I read a lot more nonfiction now because I'm spending a lot more of my time doing research, even if it's not for a specific book. For instance, I've just finished reading a couple of books on economics, and because I have some ideas for something in the future that may or may not happen, but it's still research. But it's nonfiction.
Yep.
And it takes up my time, and it's time that I would have in the past spent reading fiction. I have to be very careful about what books I pick to read.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I was a teenager, when I was a kid, I would read science fiction for fun and read tons of it for fun. And now, as life gets busy, and it's the same thing that all blurs the line. I can read a book on exploring the solar system by Robert Zubrin, and it is research, and my brain is unwilling to recognize it as an entertaining read for me. It definitely, it feels a bit more like work because I'm doing research. I'm thinking about the implications of what I'm doing. That this story, this idea could turn into a video that I'm going to work on later on. So it's
Mhm.
I can see how sort of the more work you do in science fiction, the less time you get a chance to spend, and the less almost pure joy you get because now you're starting to kind of think about it from a almost like a career standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. Everything is tinged with the question. Is this going to be useful?
Yeah,
Turn this into something.
yeah. I just tore through a nonfiction book on perennials for my garden. Page turner, just couldn't put it down. Just read through the whole thing really quickly because it had nothing to do with anything that I could use for work and about
Right.
what I could put into my garden. Um, uh, but so one thing that I found interesting is it the same narrator on Outland who did the We Are Legion series for Audible?
Yeah. Ray Porter. As far as I can tell, there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, once Audible has matched up an author and a narrator, they stick with it. Unless something happens. So yeah, I probably got Ray Porter until one of us retires.
Well, he did a great job in the Weird Legion in the Bobiverse books, and in fact, I'm finding that a little confusing with this one as I listen to it because um, it's like it's the same character, it's the same person,
Same sound,
same
same.
sound, yeah. And so
Yeah.
he's and he does a great job of affecting all these different accents and all these different personalities, and yet I just keep getting taken back to the Bobiverse when I hear him say your words.
Well, it's even more of a problem if you also read Peter Klein books
No.
because he also uses Ray Porter and
Oh, really?
Mabry. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Um, Ray does a lot of different authors, and if you happen to read two or more of those authors, yeah, there can be some crossover. And you're thinking, wait a second, that was the guy from The Fold. No, no, that was the guy from Singularity Trap. Let's face it, Ray's only got so many voices.
But I mean, even having someone read out your words and do some level of narration and even doing voices for the different characters, that's bordering on a radio play version of your work. That's got to be pretty thrilling to hear it done that way.
Mm-hmm. Definitely is. I love the way in Singularity Trap they turned the radio discussions into, well, radio conversations. They had people who sounded like they were talking over a walkie-talkie. It was a nice touch.
So let's talk about the Singularity Trap then. So this is the more recent work,
Yeah, it was the first one I did after finishing the Bobiverse.
and what is the high level version of it?
Um, a guy joins a mining cooperative, basically buys a share in a mining ship, and goes off to do asteroid mining. He discovers some ancient alien technology that is attached to an asteroid, and he actually accidentally triggers the technology. It starts to change him, and among other things, he finds himself with an alien computer in his head. The computer has a an agenda that's not necessarily good for humans. And Ivan, the protagonist, has to figure out how to balance things so that humanity doesn't get destroyed.
And it's only one book, or it's a series as well?
It's a single book. Some people have said that they'd like to see a sequel, which I think is interesting. If I do write a sequel, I think it probably is going to involve um, destruction or near destruction of the Earth, because that's the way that, the story went. If the arts show up, it's not going to be good. My wife showed up.
Um, so then, and then, then once that's done, you're working on the fourth and fifth books for the Bobiverse. Any other ideas in the works?
Well, I've got the two books of the Bobiverse, which are the next thing out, and then I'm going to do Earthside, which is the sequel to Outland, and that will complete my current contractual obligations. And then I am free to do whatever I want. I've got no, now it's the dog, got no lack of ideas. I have a story prompts list that's at about 150 items now.
Oh, really? Oh, that's amazing. I'd love to hear how you do that. How does that work for you? Right? So you've got a phone and you.
Voice recorder. Every time I have a random idea, no matter where I am, I just pull up the voice recorder, record one or two sentences, and then at some point I go through all my voice recordings and jot them down. Some of them are very thin. Some of them are very thin ideas. Maybe they'll just be a short story if I ever start writing short stories. But some of them are good for a novel.
Yeah, I have something very similar. I don't do mine as a voice recording, but mine that's a pretty good idea though. Mine are just I have a text document, and whenever an idea occurs to me for a video, I will write down that. And there is a list. There's probably probably 200, 300 ideas,
Yeah,
in the list, and yet most of them are unworkable. We have the same thing for astronomy cast episodes. Most of them would be too
probably unworkable.
complicated,
Yeah,
right? But it's nice to spend some time, and even like spending time expanding them or thinking them through a little more deeply, and just starting to see where that can percolate, because some of those ideas can be merged together or come into some other project that you're working on.
yeah. Or even if when you're trying to flesh out an idea, and even if it's not working, it may segue off in a different direction that will work better. I
uh,
think it's really
brad
wasted.
Brad McGashett asks, Dennis, what excites you the most about exploring space in the near future?
Everything. I mean, I'm an amateur astronomer. I'm a Trekkie. I'm, a science fan. It's just get out there. No matter how we have to, just get out there. I'm really glad for SpaceX and Musk and all that stuff. And the dog wants to play.
Yeah.
And
Well, I'll give you. I know you're sort of busy with a vacation. I'm going to give you like another minute or so, and then I'll let you head off and play with your dog. Um, so with Outland, it's specifically going through Audible. Is there a book version, or it has to be Audible?
well, my contracts with Audible specify that they get a 4-month exclusive. So the text versions will always come out 4 months after the Audible version.
Right.
Outland will be out September 16th. in ebook and paperback.
Okay, great. So, and then at some point we'll be able to see the rest of the Bob books. I can't wait for that. Um, what is the best way for people to follow what you're working on?
Um, I'm most active on Twitter. I do announcements on Facebook, but they tend to be fewer and farther between, and I guess a little more formal. Yeah, Twitter, Facebook.
Yep.
Uh,
Dennis underscore
my
E
wife
underscore
is yelling
Taylor.
Instagram, Instagram,
Yeah. But
and I have a blog.
yeah, and your blog. But
Yeah,
Dennis underscore E underscore Taylor.
yeah.
And I will follow you. There we go. I can't believe I wasn't following you already. Cool. Well, so great to have you hang out with us today again. I don't think you, maybe you do know how much people have enjoyed the Bobiverse books and all of your writing. I know a ton of the people listening to this are gigantic fans, and the ones who aren't yet will be when they get a chance to read the books in print, or definitely give them a shot on Audible, because hearing those voices really makes it so great. I highly recommend it. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today, and have fun with the dog and the next books.
Thanks. Oh, and check out Fans of the Bobiverse on Facebook. It's a user group that is fans of the Bobiverse. That really freaked me out when I found out about
Yeah, awesome. All right, thanks, Dennis.
it. All right, thank you. Uh,
You just got to close the window.
yeah,
There we go. All right. So I figured I'd stick around for another 15 minutes and hang out with you. Came in with any specific questions. Just to give you an update, we just posted a new QA today. So I hope you got a chance to see that. We've got another episode all about the new plans to go to the moon 2024 that's going to be coming out tomorrow. I hope it's ready. I think it'll be coming out tomorrow. And then we're working on another episode for next week that's going to be about. Hard to explain. I haven't come up with a title for it yet, but the gist is that life can handle being in space. There was a really interesting experiment that was put onto the International Space Station called Expose R, and it was designed to hit up various life forms to really extreme conditions, essentially vacuum of space. And they put them in various Mars conditions, but also space conditions. They're really testing out panspermia. And so I had a chance to read the paper. I really enjoyed it, and I will be posting information about that. So if anyone has any questions for me, I would love to take them. Dr. Ed Elcott says, "Hey, Fraser, how are we going to solve our helium shortage? Obviously, with fusion, right? We're going to be fusing hydrogen, producing electricity, and that's going to be creating helium as an output, and we'll have lots of helium. Done. Solved it for you. I, I can't think of any problem with that plan, except for maybe the difficulty of creating fusion. But it'd be weird. Wouldn't it be weird if, there you go, tardigrades don't care. Wouldn't it be weird if we went with, we did fusion just to create helium because we have no other way to get at it? That would be pretty funny. Let's see. So yeah, hit me with some other questions if you want, or I can also just wrap up the live stream. Your choice. It's all you. Um, that's great. I had a couple of people who have commented, and I can't think of a way to solve this problem. I had a couple of people comment that when I have like blank spots during the live stream, of course, when they're listening to it as a podcast, they sort of think that it's over, and I apologize. So I don't know what the solution is to that. Some kind of background audio or something, which sounds crazy, but I do have to sort of think because the whole thing is done live. So Okay, well, you know what? I think we're. There you go, Brad McGashit. Do you think 2024 will happen? No, I don't think 2024 will happen. Now, that said, so you're referring to, do I think that human beings will set foot on the moon by 2024 as announced as part of the Artemis project? And and literally this is what tomorrow's video is about. And let me first say that I'm not an aerospace engineer. I don't work for NASA. I am not knowledgeable to that level. All I am is a space journalist, someone who has been reporting on delays and changes of goals for 20 years. So that's the expertise that I bring to the table, not the specific knowledge about whether or not it's possible. In my experience, that complicated pieces of technology done for the first time tend to have delays and they tend to go over budget. And so to hit that 2024 deadline, everything's got to go exactly right. The first launch of the Space Launch System in 2020 has to go right. It has to send an uncrewed vessel out to beyond the low Earth orbit of the Earth. Then you've got to send a second one that's going to have crew on board, and they're going to go and redo Apollo 8. And there's just going to be one, the second time the Space Launch System launches, it's going to take a team of astronauts out beyond the moon and back. Wow, right? And then the third launch, and then the next launch, you're gonna launch part of the Deep Space Gateway that's going to have some interesting new technology like a solar electric engine on board. And then the third launch of the Space Launch System is that it's going to return the astronauts to the station, or bring the astronauts to the station, and then they're going to use a privately built lunar lander from some partner like Blue Origin and land on the moon, and then take off again, return to the gateway, and then come back to Earth. So is all of that possible? It's absolutely possible, right? It's just a lot of moving parts to get it done by 2024. And if anything goes wrong, if the Space Launch System, I don't know, takes longer, if the gateway module, I don't know, takes longer, if any of these parts take longer or go a little off plan, then you don't hit 2024. So 2028 feels like a more reasonable deadline. And then the other big thing is the amount of budget. They're going to be looking for probably $5 billion in additional budget per year. And that's going to be hard to push through Congress. So I think that it's one thing to want to try to do it, it's another thing to actually be able to pull it off. And yet, you're going to see both SpaceX and Blue Origin with their plans to be able to take spacecraft and possibly even people to the moon. And then, of course, there's going to be the Chinese. So I think that's sort of what I think we're looking at is my gut, really, right, says maybe. I don't know, but my gut says maybe. All right. Next question. Atlas walked away. If we never get fusion mastered, will harvesting from the lunar surface be the only reasonable source of helium? Well, I mean, the moon is going to be a source of helium-3, which is going to be a thing that I don't think we can easily make. Maybe it can, but getting it from the moon, I mean, there's not very much of it mashed into the lunar regolith. It's going to take a pretty significant mining effort on another world, and to get that stuff back to Earth, I think getting fusion going here on Earth is going to be the more reasonable, more cost-effective method of getting that helium. Just stop buying balloons. Larry Beckham, do we know how many of the 37 launches is a non-reusable booster? So there was Ars Technica, Eric Berger, again, I've mentioned before, probably my favorite space journalist. He got the scoop on the inside plans from NASA on exactly how they're going to be building out the station and sending humans to the moon and all of the trips down to the moon, and by 2028, and there was going to be dozens of launches listed out in that. So I highly recommend go to Ars Technica, look for Eric's new story, and he goes into all of the details. I don't know which of them are going to be non-reusable boosters. I'm going to wait for NASA to actually publish that document before I report on it. I was thinking of making that the sequel to tomorrow's episode. Like tomorrow's episode is 2024. Here's the plan quickly, and then when this document came out from Eric, I was like, oh, okay, that would be a good second part to really go into the details of all the different pieces that are going to come together. And I may still do it, but I want to wait for a bigger document that I can dig into and people who will be willing to go on the record to talk to me about their plans, as opposed to right now a leaked document, one picture from a leaked document. So if anyone at NASA wants to share with me the detailed plans to getting back to the moon by 2028, I would love to do a video on it. Just let me know. Just reach out, frasercain@gmail.com. Neil Yu asks, first to the moon, the BFR or spaceship or Orion? Well, neither. Okay, so the spaceship from SpaceX is designed to go to land on the moon. And SpaceX had originally said that they were going to sell a lunar orbit to a rich Japanese entrepreneur, and I think that's fallen through because apparently he's broke. But the spaceship, oh my god, yeah, should be able to do this. The Starship should be able to do this as part of its mission profile. But again, we are still in a bunch of rocket engines attached to a aluminum or stainless steel water tower, right? We are a far away from a fully reusable rocket to the scale that SpaceX has been talking about. Um, Orion is not designed to go to the moon. Orion is designed to go to the gateway, and then people will go from the gateway down to the surface of the moon. Again, a lot of moving parts here. So, who do I think is going to set foot on the moon first? I think it'll be NASA's method, but it won't happen in 2024. I think they will continue to try to get that mission architecture done, and they will have it done by 2028. So that's my guess. Someone is going to land, a NASA astronaut is going to set foot on the moon by 2028. There will be 4 years of delays. Because I think even if they don't get the increased budget, I think this is the new architecture that's going to be moving forward from this point on. And so that's what I think is going to happen. And then I think you're going to see that gives us like 8 years for SpaceX to perfect the Starship, which is about the time frame that it took them to get the Falcon Heavy going. And at the same time, we're going to see Blue Origin come out with right out of the gate with both their new Glenn and their with their new rocket system. So that's it. I'd say 2028. It's going to be NASA first, and then really quickly around that time, you'll see probably the Chinese, some wave from Blue Origin, and some wave from SpaceX all at the same time. That's my guess. Go ahead. David Sims, thank you so much for the donation. I really appreciate it. Kyle Carmichael is saying China in 2026. We should really do a pool, right? That'd be fun. If someone wants to work out a pool, I would be glad to promote it, where we all get to pick a day, a week, an hour, a minute, and then we'll ride it and see how long it takes till someone actually does set foot on the moon, and what country. And then, I don't know, someone gets the bragging rights for getting it done. Eric 1, do I agree with NASA's architecture? Yeah, I mean, again, not a rocket scientist, just a space journalist. I think that their method makes sense in that you launch the gateway and it's going close to the moon, and you've got this nice stable platform that is safe for astronauts to go to, and then all you have to do is move from the gateway down to the surface of the moon and then back up to the gateway. It seems like a less of a challenge than doing the whole stack in one launch as they did with the Apollo missions. So I like that architecture, and I like that because then you do go to stay. You build this station that is outside of the Earth's atmosphere, out of low Earth orbit, and you have to work through the technologies of it. And it's something that we need to do. We need to deal with the radiation environment. We need to deal with the distances, the communication distances. There's a lot of challenges. And so it's worth doing that. And yet also you want somewhere to go. You want to use it as a platform to go to whatever is the next step. So I think that's the way to go. All right, we've reached the end of the hour. Again, thanks to Dennis Taylor for taking the time to chat with us today. That was so much fun. Man, again, read his books or listen to his books if you're an Audible listener. They're some of the most entertaining science fiction that I have heard, I think, in my life. I would definitely put them in my top 10. So definitely do it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the mods for watching the chat. Thanks for everyone watching, and new video dropping tomorrow. So stay tuned. See you later. Shut it down on this one.